one boundary to be aware of is once you cross over into like actually earning money from it, you really do need to stand on your own 2 feet. When it becomes more than just like, this is something that you're interested in, and it changes into something that this is where you derive your income from, you have to sort of pay respect to the people in the industry that you share space with.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Devers.
I'm Jamie Derringer, and this is Clever. And today we're talking to furniture designer Jeff Martin of Jeff Martin Joinery. He was born and raised in Canada, and his youthful passion for adventure and sports like skateboarding and snowboarding resulted in a tragic accident that changed the course of his life, for the better.
He's recently course-corrected yet again and is full of enthusiasm and excitement about new discoveries and inventing new processes for his designs. Let's hear more from Jeff.
My name is Jeff Martin, and I am a contemporary furniture designer from Canada, based out of Vancouver. I think that the work that we are doing and making is sort of in great reverence for elemental materials and how to respond to the material characteristics of those inputs that we have in kind of like unique, obscure, or invented ways.
We are going to get back to all of those words: unique, obscure, invented, elemental.
Great.
I love it. But before we get there, we got to go all the way back to where the tree was planted, the Jeff Martin tree I'm talking about. So where did you grow up? And let's understand like your family dynamic, your hometown. What kind of kid were you?
I was not the picture perfect kid at all, but I was born in Edmonton, which is a town in the north and just to the east of the Rocky Mountains for any non-Canadians, which is primarily now sort of like an oil and gas town in Canada. And I have a twin sister. My parents decided after about 6 weeks that they weren't going to raise us in Edmonton. So they put us in a van and started driving west towards the coast. And I think after a year or so, we kind of like landed and settled in Vancouver, is where our family put down roots.
How old were you at that time?
Yeah, I would have been 1, I guess.
Oh, okay.
18 months, maybe. Okay. I mean, yeah, I was really raised in Vancouver. And so I spent all my youth there. I eventually, when I was older, I moved out east for school. But yeah, I kind of was raised a little bit just in this one part of Vancouver to the north side of the Lionsgate Bridge, in between my mom's house and my dad's house in West Vancouver and North Vancouver, respectively. And so it's sort of like on the side of the mountain. And I kind of like spent a lot of time as a really young kid running away from my sister, who was like super hyperactive and really, really wanted to hang out with me. And I was kind of like a little bit shy and quiet, and I was really bookish. So I was just sort of like big into books and being alone. And then as I sort of like grew up a little bit, I really took to skateboarding. I was kind of like raised in the skate park in a way. It was like really, really close to our house growing up. So and there was one really close to my dad's house. So I kind of like made fast friends with a lot of the kids at the skate park. And that was really where I spent a lot of my time. And yeah, my sister and I are very close, but we're definitely like two completely different people despite being twins. Laurel is really, really, really focused and intelligent. And I'm kind of like just a little bit more of a goofball, and probably like a little bit quieter in some ways than Laurel is. But yeah, we're still very close. And Laurel's sort of like, she's traveled around the world now, and she's set down her own roots. She's now married to a really wonderful man, Mike. He's Scottish, and they've set down roots on Vancouver Island in Duncan. And so it's kind of nice that they've, of all the places in the world that they've traveled to and lived, they're quite close to us now. We live in North Vancouver now, my wife and my daughter and I.
I'm really curious about this childhood in the skate park, also half of a twin system. And it sounds like there was a divorce if you split your time between your mom's house and your dad's house. So yeah, what can you tell us about the emotional tone of your childhood?
Oh, it was super, super adventurous. I think really there's like a lot of love in our family, and definitely like the divorce was, I mean, even as children, when it happened, we could like see it was the best thing for our parents. And so It was a really, really positive upbringing, I would say. We also have like a lot of family out east. And so when I was growing up, my grandparents, both sets, and one set of aunt and uncles, and their kids were in Toronto and Northern Ontario. We'd spend a lot of time up in the north, this place called Deep River, where my grandparents had a cottage. And so it's just sort of this like cute little bungalow type of cottage on a sandbank on a river. And it was just pretty bucolic and ideal for kids to go kind of adventure and explore. We have some family on the far east coast, just outside of Antigonish in Nova Scotia, so sort of close to Halifax. One of my cousins is a farm vet. The other one is a lobster fisherman. One of them went to go work in the oil and gas fields in Alberta and is now back in Nova Scotia again. But I guess kind of like growing up, we had a almost like cross Canada experience. We spent a lot of time, not just in BC, but sort of like across many of the different provinces, which is really great. I remember being like really, really impacted by going out to the East Coast, out to the Maritimes. And I don't know if just being like obsessed with how cool my older cousins were, but every time we'd go out there, I'd like develop a little bit of a Halifax or Nova Scotia accent. Like I was just like super into how cool they were. And so we have a really close family. And even since my parents split, that has kind of like continued. And it might seem weird, but some of my stepbrothers and stepsisters on one side of the family, like on my dad's side, will come and spend time with the stepbrothers and stepsisters and us and the parents on the other side as well. So it's like, it's not like we're one big giant happy split family, but there's like a lot of kind of fluid dynamism between all the people there. Like we all love each other. And so the divorce wasn't like this, for me anyways, it was not like a really, really like heavy emotional thing that I went through. I very much see that it was like a good thing for both my parents. I think my sister had a harder time with it, but maybe that's just because I was a boy who's just like obsessed with skateboarding and, pretty like mono focused has been like I guess the way that I have always been. When I was like 2 years old, I think somebody gave me like a plastic fire helmet as a Christmas present, and I didn't take it off until I was 5. And like that's what I wanted to do, was be a fireman. And then when I was like 5, I like learned how to draw, and I was obsessed with hockey, but really focused in this one little area of hockey masks, like goalie masks. And at the time they were all, I mean, they're probably still done the same way, but like with airbrush paint and stuff like that. And so I would like draw hockey masks, and I was like convinced I was going to be an airbrush artist for hockey teams when I was an adult. And then like that kind of passed, and I got really into skateboarding, and I kind of skateboarded through all of my youth, and then found snowboarding and surfing, and kind of like down this like long line of really being like only able to focus on one thing at a time. Found myself in furniture, I guess.
So I want to ask about your creativity, because it sounds like you found drawing. So what else were you interested in creatively as a kid, or did you even explore that at all after you were drawing the hockey masks?
I was, as I said, I was like really, really bookish. And so I would read a lot. I remember in grade 2, I got in big trouble. So it was like, we just had these the first editions of the computers in Canadian elementary schools. And one of our tasks as like an 7-year-old or 8-year-old was to write a small story. And I didn't at the time understand punctuation at all, but I wrote what would have been like a 12 or 13 page story for like somebody in grade 2. That would have been like writing Ulysses or something. It's like I wrote this huge thing, and it's 12 pages long. It probably made no sense, but I just remember it was one sentence. It was just a single long-winded sentence. I remember I got in trouble, and I didn't get in trouble, but I perceived it as trouble, and I had to go back home and like learn, where to put periods. And I just didn't get it. I edited that story, and I just put a period at the end of every line, every physical line. Even if it was the middle of a thought, I would put a period at the end of it. And, we got coupled up into groups of 2, and we had to go read our stories to kids in grade 1. So I was coupled up with this guy, Chase, who's still a longtime friend. And we had to like read our stories. And I remember he was sort of going through something similar. And anyways, I ended up kind of like in grade 2 being a bit of a dropout. Like I would stop going to my classes and I'd just go hide on the playground. There was this big old wooden boat in the woods next to the playground, and I'd go hide in there. And after a while, my teacher, Mrs. Dyke, she ended up coming to my parents' house after school one day when I was there, and like didn't announce it. She just showed up, and I was like incredibly remorseful and full of tears, and I was like a grade 2 dropout. But I really loved to write, and so I think that was the next transition that I went through. And then in high school, I ended up started taking some video production courses. And again, one of the kids that I would like group up with was this guy Chase again, and another friend Bryant, who like I'm really close with, and he's got a daughter about the same age as our kid. And we actually live just a couple blocks away from each other now. But we do video production work, and it was almost like at that time when I first took it, it was like an excuse to get out of school again, because it was like an extremely long block program. I remember it being like 2 or 3 hours long each class instead of just an hour. And you were allowed to go off school premises to go shoot. And so we just used it as an excuse to go get out of school. I think looking back on it now, to build stories and edit work and create like a visual documentation of how you were thinking about a story. So I was really into that through all of high school. Actually, Chase has gone on now. And so Chase has taken like what he learned there, and obviously from a lot of life experiences, but he was the director of cinematography for the Lemonade video from Beyonce a couple years ago.
Wow.
And he did like the Black Klansman with Spike Lee, and he's like actually built a career in this path. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
So those high school years doing video production and story building, it's interesting to me that you connected your run-on sentence story from the second grade to being an escapist, sort of, hiding in this boat, to video production in high school. And I want to know where you went after high school, but I also want to circle back to that boat at some point, because that boat made an imprint on your psyche. And
definitely. Yeah. It was a pretty dirty place. That boat was like full of rats and needles. Like it was a last ditch resort to like go hide there to be a grade 2 dropout for sure. I was kind of like running scared at that time. I don't know how to describe that feeling, but I kind of like remember grade 2 as being like this kind of scared, unhinged type of year in my life.
So interesting. What did you do after high school? Because we want to figure out how you got from video production to furniture making. And so there's a few dots you need to connect for us.
Yeah. And as I was saying as well, like I was really into skateboarding, and through skateboarding then into some snowboarding and some surfing. So I really felt like that was a really physically creative thing for me to do. Whereas like all about like Twitch reactions and kind of like analyzing and coming up with responses, like gestural responses in the moment. And I think that has had like an effect on my career in the long run as well. But when I got to university, I really had no idea what I was going to do. I almost didn't go. My parents encouraged me. I was sort of like set. I was like, oh, I'm just going to move to the mountains and be a snowboard bum, and I'll probably die by the time I'm 30. And that was going to be my life. But they encouraged me to at least apply to a couple schools. And I didn't have the best grades. I applied to a few schools that my sister had applied to, and I got like, completely rejected by all of them. But one really small school accepted me and gave me a scholarship to go there with like my 65% grade average. So I kind of was like, well, this is a sign. I should probably go do this. They're the only people that would accept me, and they gave me a scholarship to go. So I ended up going to that school, and I enrolled in business, and it was, I just kind of followed what my dad had suggested for me because I had no idea what I wanted to do. Perhaps in the long run, that was a good move. But at the time, I think I wrestled with it a lot. But anyways, in university, in the first year, I ended up having a really bad accident where I broke my back. And that was, I look back on that as being like one of the best things that's probably happened to me in my life.
Was that a sports related accident?
Yeah, it was a sports related accident. I was just sort of showing off to some girls I was snowboarding with. And yeah, I was just kind of being a stupid 18-year-old, but it was a pretty serious injury. So I had a burst fracture of my L4. So down in the lower part of your back where your diaphragm is hinged to, I lost that vertebrae through this accident. And so I've got a fused spine. And at the time, I had lost all motor function below my waist. So I was paralyzed
Oh, man.
and in a wheelchair for a while. And the recovery was really slow. On top of that, I had about my sixth concussion through that same injury, like a tendency of getting banged up. So I had like got hurt several times before, but this was fairly serious. And I lost a lot of cognitive ability at the like temporarily and at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has come back, I hope. But it was a pretty eye-opening experience for me and really kind of made me go, well, this is my life and I should be probably pursuing things that I want to do.
Is that why you describe it as the best thing that happened to you? Because it helped you
definitely
put things in focus? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And I think for me, like college was sort of a blip. I never found my feet in college, despite that happening like in first year. And I had every opportunity to go, oh, this is what I'm going to do. But, at the time I was not thinking about career. But I guess losing the ability to go skateboard and snowboard and surf and do the sort of like fun, creative, gestural outlets that I like typically had at my fingertips, I ended up starting to write a little bit. So I would just like write letters to friends back home. I got more into reading again and sort of like creatively writing and that sort of thing. And I really fell in love with being able to produce creative work without any sort of material input or anything like that. Just like, an urge to put something down, to put a thought down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of something that I just like really, really stuck with me. And it's still something I'm really passionate about, but don't have tons of time to do at the moment. And I would like to let that back into my life again. But kind of after I graduated from university, I started to feel like I found my voice in my writing. And so, I would sort of work odd jobs. I applied for a couple jobs in offices out of university just to make good of my degree, but I didn't get anything. I got a degree in business.
Okay.
I applied to work for like a heli ski operation in BC to do the marketing for them. And I got shortlisted right down to like the second last candidate. And then they ended up going with somebody else, but I could have, ended up working like up in northern British Columbia for like a luxury ski operator if I had not gotten rejected by them, which is kind of crazy that my life is, just looking back on it, I guess could have gone so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at that time I was just like, I'd like to work with my hands a little bit. Because I didn't grow up with particularly proficient mom or dad who could like fix stuff around the house very easily or anything. My dad was kind of like afraid of his tool bench, and almost every time I saw him try to work on something, he would get electrocuted. So I kind of was like, it'd be kind of cool to like learn how to work with my hands. And so I was working sort of labor jobs for a while right after school, doing landscaping and doing labor jobs around job sites and some sort of like basic carpentry stuff, and basically saving up as much money as I could to go travel.
The body's such a fascinating machine, but it sounds to me like this accident, your brain trying to heal itself, encouraged you to start putting the ideas that were coming through it down onto the page. And then you are out in the world doing these handyman jobs and these contracting carpentry jobs because your body's needing to find its connection to the material world again. Is that, would you say that is all part of your development?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say it's all part of the development. And I think also my writing and my need to write at that time was because I was in a really emotionally fragile state. And so like my emotions were at the time like really brimming.
Yeah, you needed to process that shit, man.
Yeah, exactly. I needed to process it. And through writing is how I did it. And then I got really into it. And I was like, oh, you know what? There's like a really cool sort of creative life that I had not considered before. As I went down this trajectory of business school, I was like, well, I'm just going to get a job in an office and that's it. And then I kind of realized my passion was in producing work or my own work or something with my voice in it.
Yeah, it's amazing when you find that valve and you open it up and then just allow it to flow. It feels almost like you're breathing again and you didn't even realize
Yeah.
you were suffocating.
Yeah, exactly. At that time, I was just saving. I really wanted to travel. So I kind of like saved up for a while. And I went on a trip through Central and South America. And I really just like found that I love to write about my experiences there. And so I just write frenetically every single day I was on that trip. I would write. It was pretty like eye-opening. I had like a lot of people, I just basically I would just like write to people back home. And I kept at the time like a little travel blog so my parents could like see what we were up to and my friends could see where we were and that sort of thing. But I really sort of like took it and ran with it about how I wanted to express myself. And some of it was like pretty weird. But it was like it was really cool. And I kind of realized through that whole experience and through that I wanted to be a writer. And so I got home and I had like no experience. I didn't go to school for English or anything or creative writing, but I started landing a couple freelancer gigs as a travel surf writer.
Real quick, were you still putting the periods at the end of every physical line?
Yeah. No, I still have problems with punctuation. Yeah, my wife, she insists on editing like every email I send because I'm terrible with punctuation.
Oh, you found a nice match then for you.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, no, I still have problems with that. But I ended up doing some amateur paid writing for a while, and I really really enjoyed it. But I still just loved the creative side of writing the most. But it was nice to sort of be able to see that I could earn a little bit of money from this thing that I was just interested in, and I think it gave me like a lot of confidence too to come into almost fall backwards into a little bit of a career path with no formal training. So to come in as an outsider, but still have enough of a voice that it mattered enough that somebody was going to pay me to put a small article together on something that I was interested in. I think that kind of played into my confidence in starting the furniture as well. But I got sent on a trip by Surf Canada and another magazine out of Europe to go to Grain Surfboards out of Maine and write about my experience building a handmade wooden surfboard in their studio there. And I camped on the property for a week, and the whole company, everybody there is just so incredible. It's like that maritime spirit that I love about where my aunts and uncles and cousins are from. Maine is just like Nova Scotia's neighbor, so I just felt at home there, and I really loved the process of making these like handcrafted wooden surfboards. I got home and I was like, oh, I should be doing something like this. And so I started renting some space at like a big art studio area in Vancouver. And I was working as a carpenter to pay the bills, and I really loved the carpentry aspect of it too, from like framing to formwork and pouring concrete to finishing carpentry. I just really loved getting into that idea of like maybe one day being able to build my own house, or just in general. I liked the tempo of the day and the people I was working with. And yeah, I was doing the writing as well and working, odd jobs. I was doing like house inspections as well. I just like pretty much everything to support like these multiple ideas I was juggling about like having a life of like being able to work with my hands and be creative as well and make money from my creative side. And then my wife just asked me, she's like, oh, I was like making some surfboards and paddles in my workshop. And she's like, oh, can you make some furniture for our apartment? And I was like, oh, sure. Like I'd never considered it, but having being in construction and like building stuff for like, building houses. So like building something in relation to a domestic life, getting into furniture then was really easy transition. And I started off as just like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And I started like, going online, buying some books about furniture designers. And I found this one on George Nakashima. And I was just like, this story is incredible about how, he learned how to do this in an internment camp. And he went on to become this like incredible influence over modern design through his work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so inspired by that story and about how his daughter Mira now does it. And it sort of like continued on and expanded on the idea of what her father's studio was. And I just was like, well, that's it. Like I'm gonna try to make some Nakashima style tables. And I just was like, looked at all the proportions in the books, and I started making like, you know, his conoid dining tables, but made like a coffee table version for my wife, and doing all the butterfly keys and all like, you know, all the little nuanced details you would find in a Nakashima piece. I was trying to imbue them into my own work. And I just started making work, you know, akin to that, akin to the American craft movement, mid-century modern movement. And then it kind of just like went from there. It took a while for me to find my own voice as a designer. But again, I came in it from the outside where I didn't know, I wasn't allowed to just take somebody else's ideas and sell them. I had no idea.
Right. No, I understand that. I also think that in painting, there was always a very rich tradition of copying the masters as a way of learning craft and technique. And I think that there's natural tendency to do that, maybe just to learn the process. And I'll say from personal experience, like it takes a while to get enough of a technical repertoire with wood and all the processes and materials and joinery in order to feel like you really can express yourself uniquely. The first chapter of learning to work with wood is really learning how the material behaves and learning what you can do with it and what's structurally sound and how you can manipulate it with which machines before you can decide how your own voice gets expressed through the material. So like teaching yourself by making work similar to the people that you were inspired by seems like a very natural way to teach yourself to make furniture. And then, of course, as you become more sophisticated, you realize, well, I guess what I'm doing is derivative, and it's time for me to start making it a little more Jeff Martin-ish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think another thing, too, is, like, I'm so surprised I didn't cut off my fingers. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was, like, working in the shop at, like, 2 a.m. and working 2 jobs to support this. So I'd get there at like 1 or 2 a.m. and work, and then go to sleep for a couple hours and go to my job again. And kind of the years from like 24 to 27, I just like didn't really sleep very much. I was just so obsessed with like learning how to build things, and I was making crazy technical mistakes and safety mistakes and I guess like industry mistakes. But that's, you know, for somebody who approaches things as an outsider, some of that stuff like you just have to go through. I'm
not denying your outsider status, but I am saying that like I went through the academic route, so I might be the insider that you're referring to.
Right.
Those mistakes are part of the journey. Like one of the things that I learned so hardcore is that the depth of your skill is not how well you do it the first time. It's how well you can compensate for a mistake that happens mid-project and how you can course correct. And making those mistakes is very much both an insider and outsider thing. We probably had more safety guidance than you did, for sure. But, you know, I think the mistakes are a really, really important part of the technical repertoire, because I'm sure you feel like you learned so much, and maybe even so much that's a little bit off book about how to make things that's informed your process. So
absolutely. I mean, there was not for me, there was not like a little handbook or a really like in-depth multi-volume encyclopedia of how I should approach what I was trying to do. I was just trying to make work that I thought was interesting. And I think the one boundary to be aware of is once you cross over into like actually earning money from it, you really do need to stand on your own 2 feet. When it becomes more than just like, this is something that you're interested in, and it changes into something that this is where you derive your income from. Then that is like a fairly blurry but tenuous line. And you have to sort of pay respect to the people in the industry that you share space with. And I think a lot of people have gone through growing pains like this. And
Wait,
I
what are you
certainly,
getting at? Are you talking about not making work that's too similar? Are you
yeah, I personally have tried to make work similar to other people. And
Mhm.
now I have people who reach out and they're like, oh, this guy's doing work like yours, or I'll have some person be like, hey, I made a bed just like yours. So I kind of see it from both sides now.
Mhm.
And I kind of like the way that I have wrestled with it and tried to define it in my head is, or justify it, is that like if you're really deriving like principal source of income for yourself, you really need to be doing work that is your own. And but if it's like a hobby or something like that, I think you just be nice, just like reach out to people before you
Mhm.
make the thing and be like, hey, I'm making this for my wife, or I'm making this for a client, but it's not going to go on my website. And I think that's like an appropriate way to deal with that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you that copycat, it's like it's not quite knocking off, but it's copycat work that eats into your niche in the industry if they're not being
mhm.
respectful about it. If it's because they're teaching themselves how to build furniture like you did with copying, Nakashima-esque, making things akin to Nakashima, it's
Hmm.
sort of one thing if it's for their personal use. But we're in this culture now where people see work on Instagram and Pinterest and assume that it's a recipe. It's like a recipe they
Yeah,
can follow. And then if they make it, then they assume they can make money from it. And now they're just sort of diluting
the original idea.
the original idea
Yeah.
and causing confusion for a lot of people, but also you're right, not paying
Hmm.
respect to the economics and the originality that need to
I think,
support the whole industry.
yeah, I think one person that like I derive like a lot of inspiration from, maybe not so much in the way our look works, but in the approach to our work, is Steve Hollenbeek.
Mm.
And for anybody who doesn't like know Steven's work, look it up. He's incredible. He's my favorite designer.
He does these ice cast bronze pieces that are
Yeah,
just,
yeah, and he's
yeah.
like, I kind of like look at him and I think like if I were to liken him to like any fictional story character, I look at him and I think of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, because his studio is perched above, it's like 2,500 square
Did you
feet,
just
and
call
it's,
Steve Hollenbeek
I did. I
Quasimodo?
hope he listens to this too. I hope he listens to this. But it's like his studio is like perched above. It's like a very humble but well organized, beautiful studio perched above a 35,000 square foot art foundry that his friend owns. And if you look at Steve's like body of work, he's using ice and snow from like on top of his studio. Like he opens the window and goes out onto the roof. He's using wax, which is like found down in the casting rooms below him. He's using sand, which are found down in the sand casting areas below him. He's using glass down from the glass blowing facility below him. And he's like building this body of work that is just like sort of like I imagine him with like a mop almost, like going through West Supply Foundry after hours and be like, I could like make, a crazy mushroom bubble vessel out of like resin bonded sand or something. And he's just like, it's this like closed system of really experimental research based design. And there's so much to learn where he's able to make like the most out of the least type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love design practices like that. And I have my own body of work now. I'd say like the last 2 years, we've really gotten into this like experimental type of design process. And I've talked at length with people like Steve about it because I want to make sure that the stuff that I'm doing isn't stepping on anybody else's toes in that area. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I make like a blown glass vessel, I'm doing these excavated vessels now. One of the ones I made for my wife almost looked like, the way that I did it almost looked like this Julian Watts, who's this incredible sculptor from the Bay Area. It almost looked like one of his perforated towers. And so I reached out to Julian and I was like, hey man, like I just did this piece and I kind of like, now I'm looking at it and realize like it's different materials and different effect, but it kind of looks like one of yours. And he had like this beautiful response to me, which is like, reiterating what I've been saying, which is like, yeah, like you should be doing work, like it's beautiful, but you should be doing work that is like so weird and strange that like it can only be yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of love that sentiment. And like his response was, there was like brevity to it, but it was also very direct and very, very kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of what it's about right now is because we're in this like Instagram influenced era of ideas almost becoming homogenous,
Yeah.
that as like a designer or like an upstart, somebody right out of school or somebody just falling into it, reach out to like all the people that you look up to. Like I love talking to other designers and students and people who are like way better than me. Like I love those conversations. And so I would really encourage like more dialogue between us. So there's less drama, I guess.
I want to talk to you a little bit about that idea of Instagram, because Instagram can give people the sense of you as a brand being some large operation or a
Mm-hmm.
factory or something like that. And you've recently talked a little bit on Instagram about the fact that you are sometimes a one-man operation,
Yeah.
and that there's a lot that goes into the work, but also that it's not always what it seems in terms of like financial success or having a giant team, etc. Can you talk a little bit about some of those struggles?
100%. Yeah. I think there's a lot of us in the industry. I don't want to like call anybody out who is trying to appear, like really big and successful. But I've talked openly with other people about this. And
Well, it's not even like people trying to appear that way. It's just the nature of being on Instagram and like having a body of work. Some people are like, oh, you have a lot of followers, you must be like super
or
successful.
people will like look at it and be like, oh, you get to make all the work that you design, or you get to do exactly what you want to do. And they don't consider, oh, maybe there's like financial backing behind that company, or maybe they're not showing the other portion or fraction of their work that it supports the studio practice. And I kind of, yeah, we've been through ups and downs in our business. And very recently, there's sort of like just this culmination of, I think, like a lot of different influences that made me go back to where I was size wise, like 5 years ago. And so I had to lay off my 2 employees and lay off myself. We just got really dire. Like we burned through our nest egg of our business quite quickly. And, I was just basically looking at years prior and our growth in years prior. I was like, oh, for this year, for 2019, I set out a fairly ambitious budget for marketing, prototyping, and payroll. And the year started off just really, really poorly. And that's it. Like we had sort of 6, 7 months of insanely low sales. And so that sales funnel wasn't filled up, but I had this huge commitment via payroll, marketing, and prototyping that I couldn't really plug or just stop. The cogs in those machines were already rolling. And so without the sales to support, like topping up our cash flow, we fairly quickly got into a situation that was pretty dire. Like I was having, I mean, I think all business owners have it, but sleepless nights and that sort of thing. And I'm a little bit prone to panic attacks and that. And so I was just like right on the verge of having a little bit of a meltdown. And thankfully, I talked to my father-in-law, Andrew, about this. And I just sort of like confided in him what was going on. And he was like, just get back to the core of what you do. You're going to have to let go of people. You're not going to be able to pay yourself. You're not going to be like looking at bankruptcy with your current conditions, but you have like a solvency issue where you've got a lot of debt and commitments and accounts payable and not so much accounts receivable coming in. It was pretty dire for a while there, and I'm very proud to say that like we're climbing out of it now, and that I've got my guys have been like really, really not my guys anymore, but the guys that I've called my employees for the past 5 years have been really, really, really supportive as well about this situation, and have gone on and found jobs, but being able to come in and work as contractors to get some of the orders out the door, because there's still orders to do. And they're becoming more and more employed by our business again. And hopefully I can bring them back on as employees before the end of the year. But it was like a reset button back to where I was 5 years ago. And I thought I was over that. I thought I was like beyond that. So it was a real challenge to have that ego shot, I guess.
Yeah, but I think it's great, and I think brave, and also appreciated that you would come forward to talk about these things openly, on this podcast and on Instagram, just to kind of get out there and say, like, hey, look, if you're struggling with this, like, you're not alone, like, this happens, and this happened to me. Because I think some people like someone listening right now could be ready to give up, and then your advice to like go back to the core of like what you love to do or who you are is really fantastic advice.
And I mean, like, if you've got a skill set, you can make money, and you don't have to give up on the dream because you've got like a slow financial time, or but I think one of the core lessons as well in this whole situation, I guess, was to actually put, as you're saying, I'm really happy I put it out there. And I was really I had a lot of trepidation around putting it out there because I'm also very aware that as much as I love the industry, and not everybody in this industry is also going to love me, and so I kind of felt that putting it out there could be risky too. If competition wanted to strike, that was like a perfect time to strike. And at times I felt like the vultures were circling too.
Do you see this pattern? This is your accident again.
Yeah.
And you found your recovery through writing.
Yeah, which I found, and I've started writing more since this has happened. I've started writing like quite a bit about.
I have a job and a mission for you.
Yeah, hit me.
I'm very serious about this. You have a desire to unite the industry and create connective tissue and solidarity, camaraderie, and support among other people who are, fighting the fight like you are.
Mm-hmm.
You have a voice that you express yourself through writing, and you have a natural ability to figure out how things get made and also work with the process. You need to either join some organizations and create content and a community that supports the maker industry that you're a part of, makers and artists and designers and small business people, or you need to start your own.
I think that's the way I'm leaning right now.
Okay.
I do have like a back burner idea.
Okay, good.
Which I would like to, I guess, flesh out this idea that I've got, but bring people into it. And not as like necessarily for me as a for-profit type of thing, but as something that is, like self-supporting, self-sustaining, and gives platforms to people. And I'm not sure what it really looks like, but that's something I really want to do. And so I think that like my career trajectory is going to be, it's pretty open-ended. I think probably Jamie and Amy, like you guys can tell that I kind of like just go with the flow. I don't really set too many plans for myself, but I definitely love the industry that I'm in now, and I want to remain in it for a long time. And I would love that, if people continue to buy my work, that would be great. But I think that there's going to be more as well. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like yet, but that's something that I've been like thinking about a lot too. And that's what I've been writing about a lot as well recently.
I mean, I see you as a maker and a designer for sure, but I can very much feel intuitively that there's a community organizer in you that is able to harness your gift for, making friends and writing in a way that really strengthens whatever it is you're passionate about.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I've tried to do that like throughout my career as well. Like maybe at times a little bit too in like a sophomore sort of way. And so when I first discovered, for example, like when I first discovered Steve Hollenbeek's work, I definitely was not the first one to discover his work, but I was one of the people who was like, dude, I'm doing ICFF this year. Do you want to come and show your work for free? Just like come and do this with me, because I want people to have like that platform. People whose work I believe in, I'm like totally open to just being like, here. I think it does wonderful things for context for showing our furniture with beautiful sculpture and other work or lighting, and stuff that we're not pursuing so vigorously. But I also like the core of it is that I love a lot of the work happening right now in the industry. I want to figure out how to take that sort of like sophomore idea of, giving people a platform, take it to like a real thing that like could really benefit people. So
yeah,
that's really nice to hear that
you're starting a collective, dude. You are.
I would love to.
Some sort of something. Keep us posted because I want to see this as it happens. And you do go with the flow. But I just want to remind you, too, that like life is a spiral. And when you look back at your life, I'm seeing some some patterns. You sort of revisit places, but from a higher vantage point on this spiral.
Yeah.
You're sort of
definitely
winding around the mountain. And I do think that this business setback and your slow recovery and finding your voice through it is very akin to your sports accident. And I think that's a good thing because you described that accident as the best thing that ever happened to you. So this business setback is the best thing that ever happened to you. It's better than that accident.
When we had like 500 emails, phone calls from people being like, thank you for sharing that story. I think that the analogy that I've used to describe like what's happening to us right now is that like when you want to say like grow your muscles, you need to do like a workout, and that workout will physically like tear your muscles to make them grow bigger and stronger and more adept. And I think that's sort of what's happening right now is that I got to a place of comfort and not like really looking at the financial controls of the business so much. And it was just, we did I'm really proud of the work that we spent the money on, which is great because I would probably just quit if I was like, well, I did it for nothing. But I'm very proud of what we spent the money on. Mm-hmm. And I hope that will take over to sales in the future. But it's sort of like you need to like break things apart to build them the right way again. And for me, like, I don't think this is going to be a journey of very clear cut, like, oh, this guy just started selling $5 million worth of furniture a year and that's it. Now he's got a showroom in Manhattan and London and whatever. I think for me, it's going to be like way more fluid, and like a lot of people, I think, who may not be like the icon of our generation, like we're still going to have great careers in it, but we're going to have to like really analyze what we're doing to be prominent and to be somewhat important in the industry as well. And so,
I just think that the path to authentic success is never a straight line. I totally agree with you. Like the muscle analogy is a really nice one because you do have to break things apart to make them stronger.
There's not like a formula.
No.
That's where your inventive processes are really going to serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're super creative, so I'm sure you'll go with the flow and come up with the next solution to whatever problem or challenge that you have. I want to ask you about your process. We talked a little bit about how experimental you've been getting lately. Are there any other surprises or unique aspects of what you're doing that might be interesting to discover about what you've got going on?
Yeah, I think I look at our processes as those are our designs. And so, we have dozens and dozens of products out there, like a bedside table in this design or in this process, or a credenza in this process, or a table in this process. We have like a lot of pieces that we do. But the way I like to think about our business is that it's 5 processes that I've designed. And so the pieces are almost just like a byproduct of the processes. The way that I like to think about it is each one is very much like its own identity, and it doesn't bleed too much into the next. It's very contained and removed from the other processes that we invent, except for maybe one. But one of our most popular pieces in terms of sales is our painted credenza. And so I really love that piece because it's super polarizing. We kind of joke at the studio that people hate them or they own one. And I love work that does that to people. Like there's no gray area, like, oh, maybe we could fit it in here, or maybe we could. it's like very clear. People will be like right on the surface with us when they talk to us about those pieces. It's like, no, that's horrible, or we love it. What's the price? And so I love those pieces for that reason. Like in the pure business side of it, I like it. But I think those pieces are also super gestural and really come back to the physical manipulation of things that I'm used to as like coming at this as sort of like this starry-eyed skateboard kid doing like whatever, like all of my stuff in my regular life outside of the studio I consider like physically really creative. I like those pieces because they're just paintings, and they're not really paintings, but they are paintings. So I find the painted work is really really interesting. It's proven to be one of our best sellers. But I'm really right now, I've been really into like discovering glass, and the excavated vessels have been really really interesting for us. So this year we completed a residency at the Museum of Glass down in Tacoma, and we really got to sort of push the boundaries with what we were doing, and we've really taking a scientific approach to working on this project specifically. So we basically come up with hypotheses for what could happen if we do X, and then we'll record the results. And we measure everything from like glass temperatures to glass amounts to how much cork, how long. And each time we do one, we try to improve on on the process or prove or disprove a hypothesis that we might have. And I think it's going to continue and lead us down a really interesting path with that work. And what I think what's interesting about me, or to me specifically about this, is the first time I've taken a really scientific approach about collecting data and having hypothesis about my work. I think it's kind of like it's a heritage in a way for me, because my grandpa was a nuclear physicist. And so I have a really, really strong connection with this grandpa and with my nana on this side. And he was a nuclear physicist who helped develop the nuclear program in Canada through like the 50s, 60s, 70s. He taught like PhD level ceramics at University of Toronto. And he's just like this incredibly warm guy. And also he made like live edge furniture for my nana in like the 60s. And it was probably like the first bit of furniture I ever connected with as a kid, where I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is like a slice of a tree. And so I kind of find it interesting now that I'm doing work, which is definitely not at the same level of science as what my grandpa would have been doing, but with the same objective approach to it.
I love this grandpa.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, what a wonderful influence to have in your life. And I think there's nothing more magical than being a child and discovering like the wonder of furniture and the wonder of a tree and the wonder of your, it being made by somebody all at the same time, like developing this really deep connection with that live edge table has definitely baked itself into your DNA.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of discovery that I was like taught by him. He was just this like really gentle, kind, quiet observer. And so I remember going out, in a canoe with him when I was really young in Northern Ontario, and kind of coming around the bend of this river, and there's like this giant moose there. And I was just really comfortable with him to have times of silence and observation. I think that, as you said, like it's baked into my DNA. I think having those experiences with my grandpa has really shaped, who I am today and who I strive to be for my daughter as well.
We talked about the 2 times in your life when it could have been the best thing that ever happened to you, but we have to talk about your baby too, which could possibly also be one of the best things.
Yeah, 100% the best thing that's ever happened to me.
What's it? I mean, how has that changed you?
How long ago? How old is this baby?
So yeah, my daughter, B, she is 10 and a half months old now.
Oh, fresh baby.
Fresh. Yeah. So she'll be 1 in October, and she's not dissimilar to me. She's also like very observant, kind of quiet. She loves books. She's almost got like a built-in divining rod. So if we're like in any place in the house, on the second floor or wherever, like somewhere away from her like little book stand, if I say the word books, she'll like point through the floor in the general direction to where the books are. Yeah, she's very focused. She loves her books. She loves playing. I mean, it's been amazing. It's been so amazing to transition into being a dad. I thought it was going to ruin my life, and it's done the exact opposite. It's so incredible. It's made work a little challenging at times because it's just like, how many hours in the day should I have in order to run a business and be like an active, involved parent as well? I went to two friends for advice before B came along. And one of them was like, just get prepared for the worst year of your life. And the other guy was like, it's super easy. Don't worry about anything. And to be honest, it's like, it's both of those things. It is the easiest, most wonderful job in the world. And it's also the hardest fucking thing you could imagine. And so
I call it the best worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, year one, I don't know, it's crazy, but yeah, my wife and I are just like loving most moments right now.
That's really joyful. It's very deeply human. I mean,
it is,
literally,
yeah.
you made another human.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I'm really sort of touched and moved at this cycle of life stuff with your grandfather and your child now, and I'm fast forwarding to the future. What do you hope that your grandpa years look like?
I really do hope that I'm still physically able to and mentally capable of making like interesting furniture for a long time. I love the process of design and fabrication, and I want to continue doing this for as long as I can. And I hope that I also have time, and not just in like my grandpa years, but that like throughout my daughter's life, and if we have more kids, that I have time to be a dad as well. I think one of like the big things I want to focus on in the future is maybe work that helps divert waste in general into functional, beautiful, culturally durable products. So I was really inspired by the discussion that you guys had with Greg Buckbinder from Emeco. I love his approach to work and design, and to how Emeco can also serve as a function of diverting waste out of the oceans. I love that, and would love to be able to engage in work that does something similar to that, or it does exactly that, or perhaps I can help produce work. Somebody asked me like recently, is like, what's your dream project? And I answered really quickly, and it's kind of funny, but I do think that the answer's got like some truth to it, to who I am. But I was like, oh, I'd love to design a chair that anybody in the world can grow out of mushrooms that cost $5 and is like edible and biodegradable. And you don't have to ship anything. You just like, you design like a system for somebody to make their own thing. I would love to get to a place in design where like those sorts of things are possible, and like design can be really accessible, because right now we're doing like a lot of work which is focused on the luxury end, and we're starting to play more with the middle range, and more mass produced items. So, but I would really like to get it to a place where our mass produced items can have a societal benefit too.
Well, hallelujah. That is.
I want a mushroom chair.
I want a mushroom chair too.
There we go. Your first two orders. You guys owe me $5 each.
What else do you have going on that you want our listeners to make sure to be on the lookout for?
Besides the mushroom chairs, we'll be involved in the show Temporal Arrangements at Egg Collective, opening October 4th or 5th and running for 3 months. Also in the show, some incredible photography from Jenna Westra, fiber arts from Amy Kim Keeler, Simone Bodmer Turner, who's a sculptor, is showing work, and Roger Stevens, who I love his work. He'll be showing there as well. So that's at Egg Collective. Our excavated vessels will be there, 6 of the ones that we produced at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma this year during our residency there. So really excited for that. And we have sort of, of the 5 design systems that we've created, we're in 2020 going to be releasing more iterations of what those design systems can do, and trying to go deeper into the process of each one. So I'm really excited for the painted work, and typically the canvas for the painted credenzas, the painted objects has been credenzas, but we'd like to sort of expand on that idea to take up more 3D space.
Right on. So we do want to direct our listeners also to find you on the web, to look at your work, and on social media, and definitely Instagram to read your writing and to see the posts that we mentioned earlier. So what are your social media handles and your website?
Yeah, so our website is jeffmartinjoinery.ca, and our Instagram is, we have two. One is at Jeff Martin Joinery, and then the glasswork is under a separate handle. It's at Excavated Vessels.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks everyone for listening. To see images of Jeff's work and read the show notes, click the link in the details of this episode on your podcast app, or go to cleverpodcast.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. You can subscribe to Clever on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would please rate and review us, it really helps us so much.
We also love it if you would find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're at Clever Podcast. Clever is created, produced, and hosted by us, Amy Devers and Jamie Derringer, also known as 2VDE Media, with editing by Rich Straffolino and music by L1011. Clever is proudly distributed by Design Milk.